Jack Miller stared out the viewport of the transport shuttle as Earth grew smaller behind him. He had never wanted this job. After 15 years of service in special operations and another 5 living quietly in a cabin in Montana, he had been perfectly content with his solitude. But duty called, and Jack had never been able to ignore it. "We're approaching the Liberty Star, sir," the pilot announced. "Docking in 3 minutes." Jack nodded, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. The massive diplomatic vessel came into view, sleek and impressive against the backdrop of stars. It represented humanity's greatest achievement in space engineering since first contact 7 years ago. "Nervous?" asked a voice beside him. Admiral Susan Grant sat in the adjacent seat, her uniform crisp and her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had been the one to drag Jack out of retirement, appearing at his cabin door one rainy morning with a presidential order and a plea he couldn't refuse. "No," Jack replied simply. He wasn't nervous. He was annoyed. "You're the right man for this, Jack," Susan said, reading his thoughts. "The Galaxy Council isn't just a diplomatic body. It's a nest of predators wearing fancy clothes. We need someone who can speak their language while understanding when they're really baring their teeth." Jack turned to look at her. "You have actual diplomats for that." "We have people who studied diplomacy in classrooms," Susan corrected. "You studied it in war zones. There's a difference." The shuttle docked with a gentle shudder. Jack grabbed his small duffel bag, all he had brought for what might be a years-long assignment. The rest of his team was already aboard the Liberty Star, preparing for their journey to Council Station. Walking through the ship's corridors, crew members stopped and stared. Everyone knew who he was, or at least who he had been. Jack Miller wasn't his original name, but it was the one he'd chosen when he'd left his old life behind. Few people knew about his past as the operative code named Baba Yaga, and he preferred to keep it that way. In the ship's conference room, 3 people waited for him. Olivia Bell, his administrative assistant, stood as he entered. She was young and sharp, with quick eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Miller, your quarters are prepared, and I've organized all the briefing materials on the Council species for your review," she said efficiently. Beside her, Security Officer Greg Taylor nodded a greeting. Former Marines, built like a brick wall, he would be responsible for the human delegation's safety. Jack had specifically requested him after reviewing his service record. "Sir," Greg said simply. The third person was Dr. Alan White, the xenobiologist who had been studying alien physiology since first contact. Thin and perpetually excited, he pushed his glasses up his nose as he spoke. "This is historic, truly historic. 27 species in the Council, and humans will be the 28th if we're accepted. Some of these civilizations have been spacefaring for thousands of years." Jack set his bag down. "And they all think we're children playing with matches." "Well, yes," Dr. White admitted, "but intelligent children." Admiral Grant joined them, closing the door. "The Liberty Star departs in 1 hour. The journey to Council Station will take 17 days at maximum FTL. During that time, I expect you all to become experts on Council protocol, species biology, and cultural taboos." She turned to Jack. "Remember why you were chosen. You understand threats. You see angles others miss. Earth needs that perspective now more than ever." Jack said nothing, but he understood. Humanity was walking into the unknown, joining a galactic community that had been observing them like specimens in a zoo. The Council species would be looking for weaknesses, for ways to control or contain the newest addition to their ranks. The others left to prepare for departure, but Jack stayed behind, looking at the star map showing their destination. He had survived countless missions because he always planned for the worst while hoping for the best. This time would be no different. He just hoped that what humanity needed from him would be his diplomatic skills, not the other talents that had earned him his former codename. The Liberty Star's engines hummed to life, and Earth's first diplomatic mission to the Galaxy Council began its journey into the stars. The Council station hung in space like a giant metal flower, its 5 massive arms extending from a central hub. Each arm housed representatives from different galactic regions. The Liberty Star approached slowly, dwarfed by the enormous structure built by civilizations thousands of years more advanced than humanity. Jack stood on the bridge, watching the station grow larger in the view screen. 17 days of studying alien cultures and diplomatic protocols had done little to improve his mood. "Impressive, isn't it?" Dr. White said, joining him at the viewport. "The central hub alone is the size of Manhattan." "Big target," Jack muttered, then caught himself. "Old habits." The ship's communications officer called out, "We're receiving docking instructions. They've assigned us to the outer rim section." Jack frowned. Even he knew what that meant. The outer rim was where the least important species were housed. It was the Council's first insult, subtle but clear. "Accept the assignment," he ordered. No complaints. 4 hours later, the human delegation stood in a reception hall, waiting to be officially welcomed. Jack wore a simple dark suit, preferring it to the ornate diplomatic uniform that had been offered. Olivia stayed close by, ready with information on any species they might encounter. Greg positioned himself near the entrance, scanning the room with professional detachment. The doors opened, and 3 aliens entered. The tallest was a Vraxian, nearly 7 feet of scale muscle covered in ceremonial armor. Behind him stood a Nith, a short furry being with 4 arms, and a Quarian, whose transparent skin revealed pulsing internal organs. "I am Counselor Zartesh of the Vraxian Empire," the tall alien announced, not bothering to bow or extend any greeting gesture. "I have been assigned to escort you to your introduction before the Council." Jack stepped forward and performed the Vraxian greeting gesture perfectly, a specific motion of the right hand that acknowledged the other's status. "We are honored, Counselor. I am Jack Miller, Earth's representative." The Vraxian's eyes narrowed, clearly surprised that a human knew their customs. "Follow me. The Council has allotted 10 minutes for your presentation." 10 minutes. Olivia whispered as they walked. "Most species get an hour for their first presentation." Jack nodded slightly. Another insult. They followed Zartesh through grand hallways designed to impress and intimidate. The ceilings soared hundreds of feet high, and beings of all descriptions moved about their business. Some stared openly at the humans, while others deliberately ignored them. The hairless primates attract much attention. Zartesh remarked to his colleagues, speaking in standard galactic, but making no effort to lower his voice. "They think sending a male instead of a female shows strength." Jack gave no indication he heard the insult, though he noted how the Vraxian's armor connected at the joints, a weakness if one knew how to exploit it. Again, old habits. The Council chamber was a vast amphitheater with 27 elevated platforms, each holding representatives of member species. The human delegation was directed to a small platform at the bottom level. The Grand Speaker, a Thalaxian with glowing blue skin, addressed them. "The Council recognizes the representatives of Earth, a developing world seeking association status." Jack stepped forward. "Honored representatives of the Galaxy Council, I bring greetings from Earth and its unified governments." A murmur ran through the chamber. Several counselors leaned forward, studying him. "Your species has achieved faster than light travel only recently," stated a reptilian counselor. "Many believe this invitation is premature." "Perhaps," Jack replied calmly. "But we learn quickly." "Too quickly," Zartesh interjected. "The Vraxian Empire questions whether a species with your violent history should join civilized society." Jack smiled slightly. "Counselor, I've studied the history of the Vraxian conquest of the Poloth system. Perhaps we could compare notes on violent histories." A shocked silence fell over the chamber. Jack had just referenced a controversial military campaign that the Vraxians preferred to keep quiet. Zartesh's scales darkened with anger. "You dare." "I dare to hope," Jack interrupted smoothly. that all our pasts can be set aside for a peaceful future. The Grand Speaker intervened. Your 10 minutes are concluded. The human delegation will be contacted regarding their petition for membership. As they were escorted out, Greg moved closer to Jack. You made an enemy in there. Jack nodded. I made 27 enemies, but I also made them nervous. That's a start. Olivia checked her tablet. Our quarters are in Section 17, the furthest from the central hub. One last insult for the day, Jack said. Let's see what tomorrow brings. 3 days passed on the council station. Jack attended meetings, filed reports, and memorized the names of countless alien officials. The human delegation was invited to some events but excluded from others. It was clear that Earth was being kept at arm's length. On the 4th evening, a formal reception was held for all diplomatic representatives. The massive hall glittered with light reflected off strange architecture. Beings from across the galaxy mingled, forming alliances and trading secrets. Jack stood near a quiet corner, sipping a blue liquid that was supposedly safe for human consumption. He watched Olivia expertly engaging a group of Nith diplomats, while Greg maintained a professional distance nearby. Your assistant is skilled at conversation, said a melodic voice. Jack turned to find a tall, elegant alien with silver skin. A Letharian, one of the oldest species in the council. Ambassador Eloria, Jack said with a slight bow. Yes, she's very good at her job. Unlike some of my colleagues, I believe humans deserve a place here, Eloria said quietly. Your kind learns and adapts faster than any species we encountered. Thank you, Jack replied, though not everyone shares your view. Be careful, Representative Miller. Some see your adaptability as a threat. She glided away, leaving Jack to consider her warning. Later, as the reception continued, Jack noticed a group of counselors huddled in deep conversation. He moved casually around the room until he was within earshot, pretending to admire an alien sculpture. The vote is in 2 days, a voice whispered. We must ensure the humans are denied full membership. Jack recognized Zartesh's distinctive rumble. My sources confirmed the Earth military is more advanced than they've revealed. If they gain membership, they'll have access to council technology. Another voice, thin and raspy. The preliminary committee can be persuaded to find their petition lacking. I've secured 6 votes already. Good, Zartesh said. The primates will be kept waiting for decades until we've properly contained their development. Jack had heard enough. He slipped away, careful not to draw attention. As he crossed the room toward Greg to share what he'd learned, a server accidentally bumped into him, spilling drinks. My apologies, human, the server said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Jack nodded and continued on his way. But now Zartesh was watching him with narrowed eyes. When Jack reached Greg, he kept his voice low. We have a problem. There's a plan to block our petition. Greg's expression didn't change. Should we inform Earth? Not yet. I need more information. Jack checked his communication device. I'm going to return to our quarters and look through the membership protocols. There might be a procedural challenge we can make. Jack left the reception, taking a less traveled corridor back toward the human quarters. The station was enormous, and he had spent hours memorizing its layout. This particular passage was a shortcut through a section primarily used by maintenance crews. He was halfway down the corridor when he heard footsteps behind him. Jack turned to see Zartesh and 4 Vraxian guards approaching. Representative Miller, Zartesh called out. Walking alone. Unwise. Jack remained calm. Counselor, can I help you with something? Zartesh stepped closer. I wonder what a human was doing, listening to private conversations. I was admiring the artwork, Jack replied. Though I admit, plotting to sabotage Earth's petition would be more interesting. The Vraxian's scales darkened with anger. So you did hear. A mistake, human. Jack noted the guards spreading out to surround him. We can discuss this through proper channels, Counselor. No, Zartesh said coldly. I don't think we will. You see, in this section, security monitors malfunction regularly. The diplomatic incident might occur, and no one would know. That would be unwise, Jack warned, his body tensing slightly. Zar-Tesh laughed. What will Earth do? You're alone, far from home, and no one will care about one missing human. I'm giving you a chance to walk away, Jack said quietly. And I'm not taking it. Zar-Tesh nodded to his guards. Teach the primate his place. Don't kill him, but make sure he understands how insignificant he truly is. The guards moved forward, and Jack's mind calculated angles, timing, and tactics. But there were 5 of them in a narrow corridor. Even with his training, these weren't good odds. The first blow caught him across the face, snapping his head back against the wall. Jack fell hard against the metal floor of the corridor, his mouth filled with the coppery taste of blood. The Vraxian guards surrounded him, taking turns landing blows. They were strong, much stronger than humans, and they knew how to cause pain without leaving obvious marks. Zar-Tesh watched with cold satisfaction. This is the mighty Earth representative. Pathetic. Jack tried to stand, only to receive a kick that sent him sprawling again. He had fought in many battles before, against many enemies, but rarely at such poor odds. 2 guards held his arms while another struck him repeatedly in the ribs. Perhaps now you understand your place in the galaxy, human, Zar-Tesh said. Your species is young, weak, and unwelcome. This is just a small lesson. After what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes, they stopped. Jack lay on the floor, barely conscious, his breathing shallow and painful. Dispose of him, Zar-Tesh ordered. The waste processing system in this section will work well enough. The guards dragged Jack to a maintenance hatch and dumped him down a disposal chute. He tumbled through darkness, finally landing in a large bin filled with station refuse. The impact sent waves of pain through his battered body. Everything went black. When Jack opened his eyes again, he didn't know how much time had passed. He was still in the waste bin, which thankfully hadn't been emptied into space yet. Every breath hurt. He probably had broken ribs, and possibly internal bleeding. He needed to move, to survive. With great effort, Jack pulled himself up and out of the bin. He fell to the floor of what appeared to be a waste processing room, thankfully automated and empty of workers. He dragged himself to a corner and leaned against the wall, trying to think clearly through the pain. Old memories began to surface, memories he had tried to leave behind. A snow-covered facility in Russia. 3 men down, him standing alone against 7 more, walking away alive when no one thought it possible. A jungle base in South America. Being captured, tortured, yet still completing the mission. The look of shock on his captors' faces when they realized who they had in their grasp. The Baba Yaga, one had whispered in fear before the end. Jack Miller wasn't his real name. It was one of many he had used over the years. Back on Earth, in certain circles, he had been known by a different title. The Baba Yaga, named after a mythical witch from Slavic folklore. A boogeyman, a legend whispered about in the shadows of the intelligence community. The operative who had single-handedly eliminated 3 terrorist cells when entire teams had failed. The man sent on missions with 0 survival probability, who always came back. Jack had buried that person years ago, or tried to. He took a painful breath and assessed his situation. Multiple bruised or broken ribs, possible concussion, various cuts and contusions. Bad, but he had survived worse. Much worse. Looking around, he spotted a maintenance terminal on the wall. If he could reach it, he might be able to access the station's systems. Jack crawled slowly across the floor, each movement sending spikes of pain through his body. It took several minutes to cross the room. When he finally reached the terminal, he pulled himself up to standing, leaning heavily against the wall. The screen flickered to life at his touch. Jack's vision blurred, but he forced himself to focus. Years of training took over. He bypassed the basic security protocols and gained access to the maintenance systems. From there, he found a backdoor into the station's main network. He needed to contact his team, but doing so directly would alert station security. Instead, he sent a coded message to Olivia's personal device. Protocol Winter. 3 simple characters that meant everything. His team would understand what happened. They would know what he needed. Jack sank to the floor, his strength temporarily spent. He closed his eyes, but his mind remained alert, calculating. Zartesh and his guards thought they had left a beaten diplomat to die in the garbage. Instead, they had awakened something else entirely. The hunter, the shadow, the Baba Yaga. Jack's lips formed a thin, bloody smile. These aliens didn't understand humans very well, and they certainly didn't understand him. It was time they learned. Olivia's hand trembled as she read the message on her device. 3 simple words that changed everything. Protocol Winter. Jack was in trouble, serious trouble, and the situation had moved beyond diplomacy. She immediately gathered Greg and Dr. White in their secure conference room. "It's Jack," she said, showing them the message. Protocol Winter. Greg's face hardened. When did it come in? Just now. No location data attached. Dr. White looked between them, confused. What does Protocol Winter mean? Greg and Olivia exchanged glances. They were both cleared for information the doctor wasn't. "It means Jack has been attacked," Olivia explained carefully. "And it means he's now operating in a different capacity. We need to find him," Dr. White said, reaching for his communication device. "Alert station security." "No." Greg's voice was firm. "Station security is likely compromised. Protocol Winter means Jack doesn't trust the authorities here." Olivia was already working on her tablet, sending an encrypted message to Earth. "I'm informing Admiral Grant. She'll need to know we've gone to Winter Protocol." Dr. White still looked confused. "I don't understand. Jack is a diplomat. If he's hurt, he needs medical attention." "Jack Miller is a diplomat," Olivia agreed. "But before that, he was something else." She didn't elaborate further. Greg began checking the weapons they had smuggled onto the station, disguised as diplomatic equipment. "Olivia, see if you can access station security feeds. Look for any sign of Jack in the past 6 hours." "Already on it," she replied. "But if he sent Winter Protocol, he's already gone dark. He won't be where cameras can see him." Meanwhile, in the depths of the station, Jack was moving. The pain was still intense, but he had pushed it to a distant corner of his mind. An old trick learned through years of training and combat. He had found a maintenance worker's uniform and identification badge in a locker room. The uniform hung loosely on his frame, but would help him blend in. The ID badge wouldn't stand up to close inspection, but it might get him past automated systems. Jack limped through service tunnels and maintenance corridors, areas rarely used by the diplomatic community. He had studied the station's layout extensively during their first days here. Another old habit. Always know your surroundings. Always have escape routes planned. He paused at a junction to check a small device he had taken from the maintenance room. He had modified it to display a simplified map of the station's internal systems. From here, he could reach the primary security hub for this section. Jack's mind was clear now, focused on the tasks ahead. First, survive. Second, gather intelligence. Third, neutralize the threat. The diplomatic part of him had been beaten out of his body, at least temporarily. Now, the operative was in control. In the human delegation's quarters, Olivia's search had turned up nothing. Security feeds showed Jack left the reception, but he never arrived back here, she reported. There's a gap in coverage along the west corridor of Section 15. That's where they got him, Greg said grimly. Can you pull medical records? If they took him to a medical facility. Nothing, Olivia interrupted. No human patients admitted anywhere on the station in the past 12 hours. Dr. White had been accessing his own databases, based on his absence and the Winter Protocol, on trying to estimate what injuries he might have. If he was assaulted by Vraxians, They're the most likely aggressors based on our interactions. Then we're looking at potential bone fractures, internal bleeding, possibly a concussion. Greg nodded. He's dealt with worse. Dr. White stared at him. Worse than being beaten by aliens 3 times his strength. Neither Greg nor Olivia answered. Instead, Greg checked his weapon again. We need to be ready. If Jack sent Winter Protocol, then he's hunting whoever attacked him. Hunting, Dr. White said. He needs medical attention, not revenge. You don't understand, Olivia said quietly. When Jack goes into Winter Protocol, he's not the Diplomat anymore. He reverts to his previous training. What previous training? Dr. White demanded. Before either could answer, the lights in their quarters flickered briefly. He's in the system, Greg said with a grim smile. Now it begins. Elsewhere on the station, the first of Tsar Tesh's guards was about to discover exactly what Protocol Winter meant. And why, on Earth, some operatives were spoken of only in whispers. Vrek, one of Tsar Tesh's personal guards, walked confidently through the lower corridors of the station. The incident with the human diplomat was already forgotten. After all, what was one primitive alien compared to the might of the Vraxian Empire? He rounded a corner and noticed the lights ahead were flickering. Maintenance issues again. The Council never properly funded repairs in the outer sections. Vrek's communication device buzzed. He checked it and saw a message from another guard. Security alert in Section 22. Meet there. Strange. That section was mostly storage. Vrek changed direction, heading toward a rarely used service elevator. As the doors closed behind him, the lights inside dimmed momentarily. The elevator began to descend, but then stopped between floors. Station control. Elevator malfunction in shaft 14. Vrek reported into his device. No response came. A soft thud sounded from above. Vrek looked up just as the maintenance hatch in the ceiling opened. Something dropped into the elevator. A small canister that immediately began spewing dense smoke. Vrek reached for his weapon, but hands grabbed him from above. Strong hands. Human hands. Throughout the station, similar scenes played out over the next 6 hours. Guards disappeared while on patrol. Security cameras failed at critical moments. Communication systems experienced unexplained outages. In the Council's central security office, alarms began to sound. Another guard missing, reported a Quarian security officer. That's 5 now. The chief of security, a tall Thalaxian, slammed his fist on the console. Find them. Check all monitoring systems. The systems keep experiencing failures, another officer replied. It's like the station itself is working against us. Meanwhile, the Council had called an emergency session. Representatives from all 27 species gathered in the Great Chamber, their voices raised in concern and accusation. Councillor Tsar Tesh stood before them, scales darkened with rage. The human delegation must be held responsible for these disruptions. Their representative has been missing for a full day cycle, and now my security personnel are vanishing as well. The Grand Speaker raised a glowing hand for silence. We have no evidence connecting these events to the humans. Then question them. Tsar Tesh demanded. Bring them before the Council. Before the Speaker could respond, the massive doors of the chamber opened. Admiral Susan Grant entered, flanked by 4 officers from the Liberty Star. Unlike the diplomatic uniform Jack had worn, they were dressed in formal military attire, with visible sidearms. Weapons are forbidden in the Council chamber, shouted a representative. Admiral Grant ignored the outcry. Honored Council, I have received troubling reports from Earth's diplomatic team. Our representative, Jack Miller, has gone missing. Perhaps he grew tired of Council politics and fled, Tsar Tesh suggested with a sneer. Admiral Grant fixed her gaze on the Vraxian. Jack Miller does not flee. If he is missing, it is because someone has taken action against him. The Grand Speaker intervened. Admiral, we are dealing with security concerns throughout the station. Several guards have disappeared. How interesting, Grant replied coolly. "And when did these disappearances begin?" "Approximately 18 standard hours ago," the security chief reported. "Shortly after my diplomat vanished," Grant noted. "A curious coincidence." A murmur ran through the chamber. The implications were clear. Zartesh stepped forward. "Are you suggesting that one injured human is responsible for the chaos on this station?" "Impossible." "You said injured," Grant observed. "How would you know his condition, Counselor?" Zartesh faltered for a moment, then recovered. "An assumption. If he were well, he would be present." Grant's expression remained neutral, but her eyes hardened. "Let me tell you about the man you've lost, Counselor. On Earth, there are soldiers, there are warriors, and then there are the shadows that move between them. Jack Miller served in those shadows." "What nonsense is this?" Zartesh demanded. In certain circles, Grant continued as if he hadn't spoken. "There was an operative known as Baba Yaga, named after a figure from Earth folklore, a witch who lived in a house that walked on chicken legs, who could not be escaped once she hunted you." A few council members shifted uncomfortably. Grant smiled thinly. "If Jack Miller has gone into what we call winter protocol, then I'm afraid your missing guards are merely the beginning. You see, Counselor, you didn't assault a diplomat." She paused, letting the tension build. "You assaulted the Baba Yaga." As if to punctuate her words, the lights in the council chamber flickered and went out completely. Zartesh barricaded himself in his private chambers, surrounded by his remaining guards. The massive doors were sealed, security systems activated, and weapons ready. His scales had paled to a sickly green, a sign of fear rarely seen in Vraxians. "No human could do this," he insisted to his chief guard. "It's impossible." "7 of our warriors are missing," the guard replied tensely. "The security systems keep failing. The council has voted to detain you for the attack on their diplomat." Zartesh hissed in anger. "I will not surrender to them. Post guards at all entrances. No one enters without my direct order." In the ventilation shaft above Zartesh's chambers, Jack listened carefully. His body still ached from the beating, but the pain had become simply information. A status report, nothing more. He had found medical supplies in a station clinic and treated his worst injuries. Broken ribs were wrapped tightly, cuts cleaned and sealed. He checked the small device he had modified from station tech. It showed the heat signatures of the 12 Vraxian guards inside the chamber. Jack had been methodically reducing their numbers over the past day, but these final guards were clustered together, making them harder to isolate. Jack had never intended to return to his former life. When Admiral Grant had approached him for this diplomatic mission, he had accepted on the condition that his past remain buried. But some skills never fade. Some instincts never die. He tapped a sequence into the device, triggering the program he had uploaded into the station's systems. Throughout Zartesh's chambers, the temperature began to rise. A small thing, barely noticeable at first, but Vraxians were sensitive to heat. They would grow uncomfortable, then sluggish. Jack moved silently through the ventilation system, positioning himself above a bathroom connected to the main chamber. He waited patiently as the heat did its work. "It's too hot in here," one guard complained after 30 minutes. "Environmental controls are malfunctioning," another reported, checking a panel. "Fix it," Zartesh ordered. "Perfect." Jack watched through a small gap as a guard entered the bathroom and began accessing a control panel. With practiced movements, Jack removed the ventilation grate, dropped silently to the floor behind the guard, and applied pressure to specific points on the Vraxian's neck. The alien collapsed without a sound. 1 down, 11 to go. Jack dragged the unconscious guard into a shower stall, then returned to the ventilation system. For the next hour, he worked methodically, creating small distractions that separated guards from the group. A strange noise here, a flickering light there. Each time, he struck quickly and silently. Meanwhile, outside Zartesh's chambers, Council security forces had gathered. The Grand Speaker himself stood with Admiral Grant, facing the sealed doors. "Counselor Zartesh," the Speaker announced through a communication system. "By unanimous vote, the Council demands you surrender yourself to answer for the assault on Earth's representative." No response came. Admiral Grant checked her device. "My team reports that Jack's tracking signal is in this section of the station. Your diplomat is here." The Speaker asked, surprised. "How did he bypass security?" Grant smiled slightly. "As I explained, the Baba Yaga isn't an ordinary diplomat." Inside the chambers, Zartesh grew increasingly agitated as his guards failed to respond to communication attempts. "Where is everyone?" he demanded of his chief guard. "There should be 12 of you." "I've lost contact with them, sir," the guard replied, his scales paling. "I've sent Vrex and Karn to check the perimeter." "Two more who won't return," Jack said, his voice echoing strangely through the chamber's communication system. Zartesh jumped to his feet. "Where are you, human?" "Closer than you think," Jack replied. The lights suddenly went out completely. Emergency lighting activated seconds later, casting the room in a dim red glow. The chief guard raised his weapon, turning in circles. "Show yourself, coward," Zartesh shouted. A small object rolled across the floor, stopping at the Vraxian's feet. A makeshift flashbang grenade assembled from station materials. The blast of light and sound disoriented both Vraxians. When the chief guard recovered enough to see, he found himself alone. Zartesh was gone. The outer doors to the chamber suddenly unlocked and slid open. Council security forces rushed in, weapons ready, only to find a strange scene. In the center of the main room, illuminated by the dim red emergency lights, sat Jack Miller. His face was bruised, his body clearly injured. Across from him, bound to a chair with strips of metal, sat Counselor Zartesh. The Vraxian's eyes were wide with fear. "Ah," Jack said calmly as the security team surrounded them. "Perfect timing. Counselor Zartesh and I were just about to discuss diplomatic relations." The Grand Council chamber had never been so full. Representatives from all 27 species crowded the tiered seating, while dozens of aides and security personnel lined the walls. An emergency session had been called, and no one wanted to miss it. Jack sat at the center table, his injuries now properly treated by Dr. White. Though his face still showed bruising, he wore a fresh diplomatic uniform and sat straight-backed and attentive. Beside him were Admiral Grant, Olivia, and Greg. Across from them sat a delegation of council leaders, including the Grand Speaker and representatives from the 5 oldest species. Notable by his absence was Zartesh, who remained in custody pending formal charges. The Grand Speaker rose. "This emergency session will address 2 matters: the assault on Earth's representative and Earth's petition for council membership." Jack nodded politely, as if this were a routine meeting and not the aftermath of his systematic dismantling of Zartesh's security forces. "First," the Speaker continued, "the Council formally apologizes for the attack on Representative Miller. The actions of Councilor Zartesh were not sanctioned and do not reflect our values." "Apology accepted," Jack replied simply. "Evidence has been presented that confirms Councilor Zartesh and several other members were conspiring to block Earth's petition through improper means," the Speaker said. "This is unacceptable. Those involved have been removed from the voting process." Admiral Grant leaned forward. "And what of Earth's petition?" The chamber fell silent. The Speaker consulted with his colleagues before responding. "In light of recent events, the Council has reevaluated Earth's position. Your species has demonstrated unexpected capabilities." Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Everyone knew what unexpected capabilities meant. One injured human had outmaneuvered an entire security force and captured a counselor. Therefore, the Speaker announced, "Earth's petition for full council membership is approved, effective immediately." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Such rapid approval was unprecedented. Usually, new species spent decades as probationary members before gaining full status. Jack exchanged glances with Admiral Grant. They had achieved in days what they had expected would take years. "Before we adjourn," Jack said, rising to address the council, "I would like to present evidence regarding the conspiracy against Earth." He activated a display that showed recordings of multiple council members planning to block Earth's petition. The recordings had been gathered during Jack's time moving through the station's hidden corridors. "As you can see," Jack continued, "this was not the action of one individual. 7 council members were involved in this plot." The chamber erupted in shouts and denials. The speaker called for order. "These recordings will be reviewed," he assured Jack. "If verified, appropriate action will be taken." As the session concluded, representatives approached the human delegation. Several offered formal alliances. Others requested trade agreements. Most surprising were the military representatives who quietly asked about potential exchange programs. "They want to learn how you did it," Admiral Grant said to Jack as they walked back to their quarters. "One human against an entire station." Jack shook his head. "They're missing the point. It wasn't about what I did. It was about what I didn't do." "What do you mean?" "I could have killed them all," Jack said simply. "I didn't. That's the lesson they should learn about humans. Not our capacity for violence, but our restraint in using it." 3 days later, as the Liberty Star prepared to depart for Earth with news of their success, Jack stood at a viewport looking out at the massive council station. Olivia joined him. "The council has approved 7 new diplomatic partnerships," she reported, "and 12 species have requested military exchange programs." Jack nodded. "And Zartesh," removed from his position, and returned to the Braxian Empire in disgrace. "Good." Jack turned from the viewport. "When we return to Earth, I'd like to continue as the diplomatic representative." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Really? I thought after all this, you'd want to go back to your cabin in Montana." Jack smiled slightly. "I've learned something important here. Sometimes the most effective diplomat is one who understands both words and action. Besides," he added with a rare hint of humor, "I think the council will be very polite to us from now on." As the Liberty Star pulled away from the station, word of Earth's new status spread throughout the galaxy, and with it, whispers of their representative, the quiet human who had faced the council's most powerful forces and emerged victorious. The diplomat they had foolishly assaulted, not knowing his true nature. The Baba Yaga.